I'd always thought I'd go to politics at some point in my life. I was always encouraged to do like entrepreneurial things, so I had a lot of things on the go as a kid in my teenage life. I had a professional window cleaning round, I had a fence painting, roof painting and deck painting business here. And I obviously worked at McDonald's, which I loved, and in Christchurch when I came to town it was a big deal. And then I went to university, did a 3-year BCom. I got into a 1-year Masters of Commerce Business Administration. Halfway through that year I got recruited by this company called Unilever, which is one of the biggest companies in the world. Yeah, we met when we were 15, we became really good friends with a big group of kids, and I actually think that's important for kids to have quite wide circles of friends. My kids were pretty much the same, and we started dating at 19, married at 23, and then did the rest of the life together. And honestly, best decision I'll ever make, greatest privilege of my life being married to Amanda.
Did you save yourselves for marriage?
Well, I mean, we
Kiwis love it first. Like Finn, we're making waves. Generate. Switch online today.
Christopher Luxon, Prime Minister, welcome to my podcast.
Oh, mate, I'm stoked to be on your podcast. You're someone, as I said before, I've followed for a long time, and I just love the format of what you're doing here. It's absolutely brilliant. So, looking forward to our chat and conversation.
It's wonderful. I'm nervous. I'm really nervous.
Oh, please don't be nervous. No, honestly, let's just have a chat as mates at a pub. It'll be great. Okay. So, if you're good, I'll be good. So.
And another thing I'm nervous about, my little dog is in the studio with us, and when the leader of the opposition was in here, he defecated. The dog defecated on the floor. So,
no, look, Kanye's fine.
I've told him it's the Prime Minister, so we need some decorum.
I think I was saying to you, Anthony Albanese's dog Toto goes everywhere with him, and so I've got to know Toto pretty well over the last year and a bit. So that's awesome to have Kanye here.
Hey, I messaged your friend John Key, Sir John Key, to say that you were coming in, and did he have any icebreakers? he replied saying, "Ask."
This could go anywhere.
Ask if he feels his career in Boy Scouts was more glorious and successful than mine, and if so, why?
No, John and Brian are really good friends of Amanda and mine, and it's actually a really special relationship actually, because there's not many people who I'm the 42nd Prime Minister of New Zealand, and there's not that many of us, and it is actually quite special to have one of your best mates who's been it as well. And so but we were mates before I went into politics, and so the four of us spent quite a bit of time together. But Brona was one night talking about her Girl Guides awards, and Amanda was a Girl Guider, and I was something called Boys Brigade, which was basically a Presbyterian version of Scouts. And he wasn't a member of Scouts or anything, and so we just sort of were giving him grief about the lack of badges for cooking and camping, and then Brona brought out her badges, and then Amanda brought out her badges, and I brought out my badges, and just to wind them up. So we have a great relationship. We typically one of us sort of thinks about the dinner, and one of us thinks about the movie to watch, and we try and catch up on Saturday nights or go for a walk together on Sunday mornings. So
when did you become friends? Was it during your tenure at Air New Zealand, or
it was
earlier?
I'd come back from New York about 2011. And obviously coming back home to New Zealand after 16 years away, where I'd left as a 24-year-old and came back home. And I got to meet John actually probably in the first couple of months when I'd come back from New York, and I actually hadn't taken over from Rob Fife as Air New Zealand, a CEO. Then I was in a process, and we first met then, and then I got to know him obviously as CEO. And we both sort of have pretty similar stories. Come from Christchurch, been with our partners for a long time, and met as at high school. Yeah, very similar story overseas, back again, and we've got a similar sense of humour, similar temperaments in terms of pretty even and consistent. And he and I used to talk sort of typically very late at night. Both worked long hours, and we would sort of catch up and shoot the breeze, and it just became very good friends before. And then I'd always thought I'd go to politics at some point in my life, but I always wanted to go off and do something else before I came to it. And so it sort of worked out in the way that it did. But it's lovely to have that relationship. And we don't actually talk, or we're mates first, and politics is second. So the other things we'll disagree on and have different views on. I'm sure
it's healthy,
but we don't actually discuss that stuff. We sort of we have our own friendship, and then our wives have got to become really good friends as well. And the four of when you get a couple's relationship that actually works. We're all four actually, Brian and I. It's great. It's great. So we can holiday together, and it's all great. So
he also said, and does he have any proof that in the history of ownership he has ever caught a fish on his sea legs boat? Sea legs is one of those amphibious ones, eh?
Yeah,
so you drive it down to the...
Yeah, well, at Air New Zealand, I decided I'd buy a house on Waiheke as a bit of a holiday place, and but it was at a stage in life where actually my kids hadn't got their driver's licenses, so they're busy on the weekends and they're still needing transportation, and you're already a glorified taxi driver, and so I never really got to use it much. And then I took on this new job, and you work weekends and 24/7 basically, so I don't get there very often. But I've got a sea legs boat, like a 20-foot sea legs boat. And Amanda and I go out and fish together, so that's what we like doing. It's just our time to chit-chat and talk stuff through, and and we don't use live bait. We just have these big orange eyes. It's pretty simple fishing. But no, there's good snapper, so we catch we get one or two snapper, and that's all we need.
You're denying that?
But I think he's wrong about that, because he's just full of it, actually. But the thing that he does is you go over to his house for dinner and stuff, and he pulls out very expensive French wines. I don't drink alcohol, right? Never have in my whole life, and for different reasons, but as a result, he'll bring out different versions of Pepsi and say this is a great class of Pepsi from 2015, and so we have different tastes in that regard. But no, I do catch fish. I think that's wrong of him to say that.
Yeah, you're a Pepsi guy, eh? Pepsi Max.
Oh, yeah, I am. Just because
is that your only vice?
No. Well, there's probably a lot of them, but Pepsi, I just sort of I don't actually. I don't actually demand Pepsi or anything. It's a bit of a problem when you're Prime Minister, because people say, what do you want? You say, do you have Pepsi Max or something? And then all of a sudden you think you're whispering, and you end up looks like you're shouting, and so people then say, he only ever must have green M&Ms and Pepsi Max and all these riders and stuff, and it's not the case at all. But no, I lived in Canada for a bit, and that was a Pepsi market, so I sort of got into Pepsi Max.
Because I'm Coke specific. Back in the day when KFC was a PepsiCo
outfit,
I'd get my KFC, then go to the dairy around the corner and get a Coke. Like I'm that.
You're that particular.
If I go to a cafe and there's
you could taste the difference between Coke and a Pepsi, right?
So,
easily, yeah.
Could you?
Yeah, I think I can too. Yeah.
So you're a Pepsi guy, no coffee.
Yeah, no alcohol.
No alcohol. You've never touched a drop of alcohol.
Yeah, no, it's really weird. People will often say to me, is that a religious thing or something like that? It's got nothing to do with that.
It's your granddad, right?
Yeah. My granddad, great man, but flawed like all of us, and he had a problem with alcohol. Really, he was a groundsman at Hagley Oval in Christchurch. Basically mowed the lawns and did that stuff. My father's the oldest of 5 boys. Incredible guy, really. Loved my dad because he changed the course of parenting in our family, really. But I just remember as a young chap spending time with my granddad, and in the August school holidays, and just seeing him out of control. And I obviously decided as a 7 or an 9-year-old that was sort of something that was that half G that made him go a bit funny. And for some reason, I decided then and there that wasn't something I was doing, and I've never done it. Now, I went to quite traditional boys' schools. I got a lot of mates, so I was always the sober driver, and I was always invited, and everyone just arranged alternatives for me. And no, I've never drunk alcohol at all. And but it's just genuinely, I can't explain it. When my mum and dad, and my brothers, they do, but I just never have. So it's an odd, it's an interesting one when you sort of go back and explore where did that come from, or why did you make that decision consciously or unconsciously. And for me, it was clearly, seeing him out of control at times and just deciding that's not something that I want to do.
It's a clear parallel with Trump and yourself, because he's never touched a drop either.
Oh, really?
And his brother died of alcoholism.
Yeah,
so it's the same sort of thing. So he decided never to touch it. But you and I are similar age. That must have been. I feel like there's a greater understanding and awareness and appreciation of sobriety now, and the harm that alcohol causes. But back in the 90s, like being at varsity, there must have been a fair bit of peer pressure.
Yeah, I was quite lucky. I'm a big extrovert, so I always had a lot of friends, and and people just understood that's just how I was, and so they just arranged orange juice or soft drinks for me when I go to all the parties. But there's just a point when everyone got completely incoherent, and I remember everything obviously, and there's a point when you go, okay, I think we might be time to head home now about midnight. So but no, all my friends were really decent with it, but yeah. You're right. I mean, at that era, when we came through, there was a lot more peer pressure. And it's interesting because a lot of my friends now in their late 40s, early 50s, have decided for different reasons to actually say, "Hey, listen, this is something this isn't good for me." And it's not that it's not can't be managed. It's just that they've either decided they're not their best selves actually when they're impaired like that. And so it's interesting. I've had a number of friends come actually in their late 40s and 50s come to the same decision that I came to, probably a bit younger. But how did you make that decision yourself, or where are you at?
Well, I still drink, but I'm very mindful of my intake these days.
Oh yeah,
But similar sort of thing. Like all my uncles, I'm from a very big Christian family. All my uncles, my granddad had a bar downstairs in his basement, and we'd go down there and congregate. From a young age, Dad had let me drink the froth on the beer. I understand now as an adult that was not a good deal.
Yeah.
But we were just always surrounded by it. But rather than put me off, to me, I suppose it's what it meant to be a man.
Yeah.
To drink alcohol, which is incorrect. And I
was quite lucky because I think what happened for me was that I'd obviously had that experience where I'd spend my August school holidays often with my grandparents. And at that time, my family was living in Auckland. We were born in Christchurch, lived there for my first 7 years, moved up to Howick in Auckland, was here for about 9 or 10 years, and moved back to Christchurch. So we were up here, and I'd go down for August school holidays and spend time with Nan and Granddad, and on both sides of my family. But my dad was really he's really my hero because he sort of really, we came from a background where, there's just a lot of interaction with the criminal justice system when you go back through, look at our family history.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I studied family. I really got into my family history and a bit of genealogy, probably 10, 15 years ago. And actually, probably for some time, and you go back through the newspapers of yesteryear and there's an awful lot of Luxons making appearances at courts and jail time and stuff like that and being general nuisances. But my dad was really quite a good guy because he sort of changed the course of parenting in my family, and being a good father and stuff, and being really intentional and very purposeful about that. And I really admired that because he'd come from pretty challenging circumstances and obviously determined he wanted to do it differently. And set a great example to me and my two brothers as well because I'm the oldest of three boys. So Mum and Dad, actually, I remember when we were growing up, really alcohol wasn't really prevalent when we were young chaps. And then, but they obviously, love their wines, as did my brothers as well.
Mm. Well, let's talk about the early years. So I've got a photo of you, and this is something you and I had in common. I had a cruiser as well.
Mate, I wanted
I'm
actually on trade. I'm on Trade Me trying to buy one of those things at the moment. Actually, just for sentimental reasons. Right. Actually, I don't know whether you find that as well. As you get older, you sort of get a bit sentimental about that stuff. My brother had the HMX 500, which was the yellow BMX, which was pretty cool. And this bike's quite interesting because it actually was again my dad because he said to me, Chris, look. I'd been saving up for a bike. I was about 10 when I got my first two-wheeler. And he said, I'll tell you what, what sort of bike do you think you'd like? And I said, probably a Rally 20 or a Healing Cruiser with the 3-speed with the gear shift on the handlebar. And he said, okay, I'll tell you what, you're going to go around and just call up. In those days, we had classified ads. For people listening, they wouldn't know what the hell we're talking about. But the newspaper would come with classified ads, and you'd look up, and every Saturday morning you get the big paper, and you'd go through and find the Healing Cruiser. And so I had to call for 3 weekends in a row. I could just call people who had Healing Cruisers for sale. And Dad, it was a sales guy, and he taught me to say, so, sir, I see you've got a Healing Cruiser for sale. What colour is it? Oh, it's green or it's blue. Okay, is the paint in good condition or not? What's the tread like on the tyres? Does it come with any extras like a dynamo, which was a light that was attached to the wheel of the bike? What kind of mudguards is it? So Dad made me go through the whole palaver, and then he said, right, we'll go out and we'll spend you $100 that you've saved up to buy the second-hand bike. And it taught me a lot about valuing money, obviously, and value, and also how to negotiate and to do all those sorts of things. And it's interesting, then you fast forward with your own kids, and of course, you're in a different financial situation, and it's easier just to go down and buy the bike and from the warehouse or whatever you need to do. And so how do you transfer those values that my dad was teaching me of how to buy a bike, which was actually a precursor to how to buy a car and how to buy a house, and teach me those sorts of things. How do you transfer that to your kids when your values, you want to teach those values, but you actually have different financial circumstances or conditions that you're in. So no, I love that bike, and from there I got my paper round and we were away. Did you have a cruiser as well?
Yeah, I wanted a BMX.
I know, mate. They were cool.
Wanted me to give me a sensible bike.
Yeah, my brother got the Rally 20, but then he got an HMX 600 and then the HMX 500. And that was Healing, which was a New Zealand bike company, that made bikes in the late 70s, early 80s.
That's incredible.
It was pretty cool.
So
that's one photo. It's cool.
Who was Christopher Luxon as a kid? What was the most trouble you got in?
Not a lot of trouble. I got into a little bit more trouble in sort of early high school, fourth form probably. It was that troublesome year between school cert as it was and after you started third form.
Like what?
the French bombed the Rainbow Warrior, if you remember, in 1985, 84, 85 was it? And I remember I was in French class. I didn't really like French that much, and I just thought we'd have a boycott of French as a result of all of that at Howard College. So that was probably as far as I sort of went at that point. So, but no, I was pretty well behaved. I was born to. My parents were young. They were 21, 22 when I was born. They'd left school at 15, 16. They're awesome parents, amazing people. My mum went on to become a therapist and a counsellor and stuff. I actually got her to come to university when I'd got to university. But I was a pretty, I'm a big extrovert, so I get a lot of energy from being around people. And so that's always been the case. It's how I process, by talking and meeting with people. It's just pretty well behaved oldest child, I guess.
Well, you must have been a bully at some point to your younger siblings. It's a rite of passage, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we were actually really close, and my parents did a very good job. So I'm the oldest of three boys, right? Christopher, Carl, and Matthew, and we're all quite close in ages. Probably three of us under the age of 5. But actually, we were taught that we all had different skills, and Mum and Dad were actually, said, you're different, but you're equal. And so I was, good at sport and liked school and study and stuff like that. Carl's incredibly creative and, uber smart. And Matthew, awesome people person, and, has gone into big environmental spaces and stuff like that. So we were raised to sort of really respect each other's differences, and my mum was really thoughtful about that stuff. And there were different times when actually we were all at different schools because Mum and Dad were trying to match the school to the kid, and to make sure that we were sort of and I was one of those kids that was going to be fine anywhere I kind of went. Then the brother Carl, at one point, he needed a bit more external discipline, and Matthew needed something different. So it was all good. So we were raised, we're really tight, and in fact, it's interesting because we all left home at the same time. All three of us left home, and we never went back. And so Mum and Dad at 44 had no kids at home. We'd all left, and we never came home. And so the three of us then went our sort of individual ways, building our careers. And Matthew, the youngest, was overseas for a bit. I was obviously overseas for 16 years. Carl was building his career here in New Zealand in hospitality and hotels and things. But every time I came home, every year, we'd go to Devotional Campground just out of Christchurch on the road to Akaroa. And we also worked quite hard to make sure that just the three of us had time without our partners and without our kids just to build new experiences together. Because often for guys, it's the shared experiences of the things we've done together that builds the relationship. And a lot of our reference was obviously when we were at home and all the crazy stuff we got up to there. But as adults and as people that, how do you feed and keep feeding that relationship as you move through your 20s and 30s and you're actually living apart from each other? And it's one of the great joys of my life now is, that I talk to my brothers probably, once or twice a week,
Wow.
Yeah, Mum and Dad every day, every second day. So we're a really tight family.
Yeah. So if I've got the calculations correct, your parents are still younger than the Deputy Prime Minister
Yes,
and younger than the previous two American presidents.
yeah, they are. So Mum and Dad are 76. 76. Yeah. 70.
Your mum, Kathleen, she sounds amazing. When did you last have some bacon and egg pie?
Not that. Actually, I haven't had bacon and egg pie from her for a while, but she makes a mean bacon and egg pie. But obviously spoke to her on Mother's Day on Sunday, and due to talk to her later on this afternoon. But Mum's really cool. Yeah, so Dad came from a pretty tough background and really became, as I said, I remember writing him a letter actually when I was 30 about just thanking him for changing the course of, I called it a river, of how he changed and bent the river sort of to change the course of parenting in our family as a dad. And my mum's amazing as well. She left school at 15. Ended up, but very intuitive, really good, big feeling person, very thoughtful, very smart. And I got to university, and I was the first ever to go to university in my family. I didn't know anyone who'd been to university, really. And I got there, and I was in my second or third year, and I said to Mum, you should come to university, Mum, you'd be awesome. And so she came to University of Canterbury when I was there, I think, and just as I was finishing up, and she did a diploma in social work. And then she's gone on to become a really outstanding, therapist, counsellor. And she always had that orientation. She always read a lot, as I was growing up as a kid, and was really thoughtful about that stuff. And, she's amazing. I mean, even today, at 76, she supervises a whole range of counsellors and has some of her own private clients still today. But as a result, I was really privileged because I grew up in a family where my father had worked from the bottom up, and had worked really hard to become a sales rep and then a sales manager, worked for a company called Johnson & Johnson. Yeah. And then my mum had, sort of been very interested in sort of, psychology and personalities and all that sort of thing. And so I sort of felt I got a good upbringing in terms of, sort of both the soft and the hard, and sort of, I think they were very determined to build good EQ skills, for what you'd call it today, into us, and I think that served me incredibly well. And Mum was always of the view, which was, I remember saying to me as a little chap, walk across the room and find someone different from you, and talk to them. And I remember saying the same thing to my kids when I was parenting as well, because it was like, schools can be very cliquey, and you see it even more so, I think, in this day and age. And I said to Olivia, you've got to be Switzerland, you've got to be friendly with everybody, and you find that kid that sort of is a bit lost, and go say hello, and you never know what's going to happen when you do that. So, I think Mum, really got me thinking about people and care of people, and Dad was, just a born optimist, just don't let your circumstances define who you are and where you're going and what you're about. So, and so that combination was pretty special to be invested in me, really.
How do they cope with? I mean, it's a surreal position. Your son growing up to be the Prime Minister of the country. How do they cope with like the criticism? I'm just thinking of my mum. Like, my mum she's my biggest cheerleader. Like, yeah, same. She's super supportive. So when people are calling you like bland or boring or whatever,
I think it's really hard. Well, they call us a lot worse than that. Let's be honest about it. But Mum, the first time, sort of, I guess because I'd left home I left New Zealand at 24. Amanda and I had met at 15. And we were away overseas. And then I came back and obviously took on the New Zealand job, which had more public profile, I guess, in New Zealand than most CEO jobs. And then when I came into politics, I remember Mum had read the first article, and I think in the Herald, and she said, "Oh, gee, they don't like you that much." I said, "Mum, what do you mean?" I said, "The article was okay." She said, "Oh, no, I read all the comments section." I said, "Oh, no, please don't do that. They ain't going to like your little boy. So, let's just be really clear about this." So I think it's really difficult for them. I think it's actually in some ways harder for them than it is, and family, than it is for me personally going through the experience. And I'm sure Chris Hipkins and John Key and Jacinda would say similar things. But it is, you do life with these family and friends that actually love you because of who you are, not because of what you do. And also, they take a lot of the bruising from the criticism as well. And if you're not in the political world, which my parents aren't, they're just really decent, good people who have tried to raise a great family and help people. Some of that can be quite challenging. So I think they've all learnt coping mechanisms for actually, not making it personal. And that's what I've had to do, and that's what the family does as well.
Yeah. From what I can gather, you've had very few jobs, in your career. Can I try and do them from current to...
Yeah.
Okay, so politics.
Yep.
Airline boss.
Yep.
Unilever, various roles for 17 years.
16 years.
16 years.
Yep.
Porter at Crown Plaza.
Yep. Park Royal Hotel, Christchurch. Yep.
3 years at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And a neighbourhood window washing business at 12.
Yeah.
Is that the lot?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's been interesting actually in my career because, as I said, my dad was a real positivity kind of guy, and I remember I read a book called Life is Tremendous by Charlie Tremendous Jones, and he would have given it to all the sales reps, and I must have been about 12 or 13. And so I was always encouraged to do like entrepreneurial things. So I had a lot of things on the go as a kid through my teenage life. I had a professional window cleaning round. I had a fence painting, roof painting, and deck painting business here. I traded Commando war magazines. You might remember those. I remember those in intermediate age. We had those, and so I was just doing lots of stuff like that. I had an artificial flower business that I would that would get people would contract for a monthly service, and flower arrangements would come and go all through university. And I learnt to I was sort of learnt to take responsibility for financial things pretty early on, and so yeah, that was it. And then I obviously worked at McDonald's, which I loved, and in Christchurch when it came to town, it was a big deal. And then I worked at the porter as a porter at the Park Royal, but a lot of it was people stuff, right? I love people, and as an extrovert, sort of engaging with that. And then I went to university, did a 3-year BCom, and then I got into a 1-year Masters of Commerce and Business Administration. And halfway through that year, I got recruited by this company called Unilever, which is one of the biggest companies in the world. as on their management trainee program. And so I came out of that after my 4 years with the 2 degrees and joined Unilever. And it was an amazing place for a kid from Christchurch, because they then, I joined the graduate program, which was, you did a lot of psych testing and leadership development and investment happened over that period of time. And so I then got into, a global pool of talent, and that was what led me then moving around the world. So I had 2 years here in New Zealand, 5 years in Sydney, and then time in London, Chicago, Toronto, and New York. And I loved that place because it was one of the big global companies of the world. You got to travel all over the place. I probably visited every country. I was doing a global job while I was also trying to run bits of the American business or Asian business. And so it was just a really very stimulating environment and a great educational environment, really.
Are you still brand loyal now? What deodorant are you wearing today?
Today I'm still wearing my Rexona deodorant and my yep, no, exactly.
Can you
I used my Dove body wash this morning.
Why is there so little deodorant in the bottles you buy?
Oh, I don't know. I think that's what they call shrinkflation, isn't it? Right, overinflation, they sort of do that. But the weirdest thing was I ended up running sort of, being responsible for hair care companies. And when you look like me, and you're rocking to Tony and Guy, and I think we bought the Tony and Guy business as well. And it's sort of like you end up paying a lot more for the businesses because they think you're going to just destroy value, because it's like
you're anti-hair.
You got this bald guy showing us we can do wonderful things with your hair care company if you let us buy it off you. But honestly, for a kid from New Zealand to be able to, it got me very globally oriented, which was what I was always wanting to do. And so for me, actually, a lot of what I learned at Unilever, people probably don't realise, but it's very helpful in the roles that I do now on the international front, connecting with world leaders or going to countries. So when I think I probably came to the job of Prime Minister, one of the Prime Ministers that knew the world the best, because I sort of had worked for one of the big global multinational companies, and I had been to India multiple times. I've been to Manila multiple times, and China many, many times. And so I understand those markets and I understand the countries pretty well. And I used to do things like, because I travelled probably internationally every week for a long period of time. One is that I would sort of get to a country and I had a rule which was I'd go from the airport and I'd go straight to someone's house, a consumer's house, and I'd have 2 hours of a conversation that I could talk about anything I wanted to talk about to try and understand what was happening for people in those countries. And so I remember flying into Russia and Moscow and going to an apartment and meeting with a couple there, and I could talk to them before I met anybody from the business, because they were often wealthy expatriates and living a different life from what you felt the people were living. And that way I didn't just bounce around the world, staying in a Hilton hotel that was the same, whether it was in Bangkok or America or Argentina or somewhere. So I think that part of being a part of a global business like that was really great. You learnt lots around lots of different parts of business, obviously, and different businesses that you were responsible for, but that needed turnaround, sorting out, cleaning up, growth. But the most incredible thing was you work with some really smart people, and so you learn a lot of people skills as well. And actually, what I learnt in life was it's not actually your book smarts that really determine how far you go. It's actually, are you curious about learning new things? Can you deal with conflict? Can you communicate effectively? And do you have good character? And those are the things that ultimately determine, how high people go ultimately.
You mentioned your hair or lack of just a second ago. I've got a photo here of you at McDonald's. It's fabulous hair. This might seem like
a great trip down memory lane. That's awesome.
This might seem like a silly question, but it's a serious question for me because I've got a few friends that are bald, and a couple of them are still in their 40s, and they won't be seen without a baseball cap. I've got a mate who's a good-looking fit dude, and he's been bald, and I never thought anything of it, but he went to Turkey last year to get a hair transplant.
Oh, I've seen that mate on YouTube.
It's transformed his life.
Between the veneers and the hair transplants, yeah.
What was your relationship like with losing your hair?
Oh, it was just like, let's embrace it. There's not much you can do about it. It's pure genetics. Let's go for it. And so, in your head you think, well, Jason Statham, he's a good-looking bald dude.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Joe Rogan. There's plenty of us now. I'm doing this job for the bald men of New Zealand, showing what's possible. We can't all be male models like yourself with a full head of hair. But no, Look, it wasn't. I mean, it was just something I just, you just have to embrace and go with it, right? It is what it is, and so. But you're funny you say that. I was going through Turkey after coming back from Gallipoli, and I passed through Istanbul to meet with the president of Turkey, and I didn't realise, man, there's a whole new cosmetic tourism industry that's coming out of Turkey that's got some pretty cool looks going on.
It's massive. Yeah, when I went there, the hotel buffet in the morning, dudes everywhere with headbands on and like blood coming out of their pores.
I reckon you might. Yeah, it would have been quite funny if I'd come back from Turkey like that. Walked into cabinet the next week and gone, "Hi guys, good to see you again."
Imagine that. I've got another photo for you.
Oh,
it's yourself and
that's
Amanda.
awesome.
So,
best decision I ever made.
Yeah. So, I've read various stories. So you're 15 and she's 17 when you met.
Yep.
I've heard it was a church youth group thing.
I belonged to a big church youth group, and we had a lot of friends. There was 60, 70 kids there, and we had a progressive. In the old days, they had this thing called progressive dinner, and so you'd go around different kids' parents' houses, and you'd have a main course, an entree, a dessert, whatever snacks, food. So we were on a car rally, and it was a sort of a car rally where you had to sort of answer questions and quizzes and stuff like that. And we'd just moved back from Auckland to Christchurch, and I got to meet Amanda through that. And we met when we were 15. We became really good friends with a big group of kids. And I actually think that's important for kids to have quite wide circles of friends. My kids were pretty much the same. And we started dating at 19, married at 23, and then did life the rest of the life together. And honestly, best decision I'll ever make. Greatest privilege of my life being married to Amanda.
So you knew each other for 4 years as friends before you got together as a couple. Did you have a crush on her? Were you in love with her during that time?
We were friends first, sort of, and but obviously I thought she was stunning, and we went to we're partnering each other at school balls or actually teachers' college ball. She's 2 years older than me, but she's also left school at sixth form, went straight to university from the sixth form, so it was actually 3 years ahead of me at academically and stuff, and so. To this day, she is still a bit upset that I didn't invite her as my date to my school ball, but I went to her teachers' college ball as her date. So, but no, that without doubt is sort of the thing that I think, Amanda's my rock really, in terms of we've done life together with all its ups and downs, and obviously we have both come from pretty similar backgrounds and family-wise, and our parents have subsequently got to know each other well and are good friends, and that's been great for us raising our kids to have their both grandparents in relationships with each other too. But we left New Zealand, as I said, when I was 24, and we went and had William was born in Sydney and Olivia was born in London, and the kids were really raised in Chicago. And you have to get really tight, as a couple of how do you do. I had quite extreme jobs at a young age. I had big jobs at a young age. She also was an outstanding teacher, and then became a really great consultant working with Myers-Briggs and conflict management with boards and teams and all that sort of skill set. And it's just really smart. And so, there were times when for her to carry on with her consulting, I was in a stable place and able to do all the school run and stuff like that, and she could do more of that. But she's been awesome on this whole journey that we've been on together. So, it's pretty awesome, really. I mean, really amazing.
Was the proposal anything special? What did you do?
Actually, for 3 of the 4 years we were dating, we were in different cities. So it actually made our communication skills get really tight. And it sounds, we were young, and but actually I think both had our heads, screwed on pretty well, and sort of, wanted to get, good at that. So no, I came down to Christchurch. I remember going out to the garage to ask Tom, her dad, who had recently just said I could stop calling him Mr. Ray and call him Tom, which I didn't call him anything for a year because I was too embarrassed to call him anything. And then I went out to the garage to sort of ask for formal permission to marry his daughter. And I remember there was a guy, Ray, who was his neighbour, who was over in his tight shorts and his tank top, and he was talking to Tom, and I got too nervous to ask Tom formally for permission, and it was a standard proposal at a restaurant in Christchurch, which was pretty cool.
And did you save yourselves for marriage?
Well, I mean, we were very committed to each other, and so that's been our. We basically. I wanted to make sure when I go into a relationship with someone, I wanted to do it for life, and that was Amanda for me. Yeah,
that's cool. What's the biggest argument or conflict you guys have had?
We don't actually have huge barneys. It's actually interesting. Our personalities are such that we sort of. Amanda's probably more of an introvert. She needs to get up in the morning, do a 12K run, come back, do her fitness stuff, and and that's how she processes. She's a very gregarious introvert, I'd say, is how I'd describe it. But no, we tend to process along the way. So, if we've got irritants with each other or issues with each other, we'll just openly just talk about it before the end of a day. And I was lucky. I had awesome grandparents who, on my mum's side, who were married for a very long time, I think 60-something years. My parents have been married for, 55 years. So we had good models of parenting and relationships. But no, our issues are very small in the scheme of things. And if we do, we just sit down and talk it out. We've done things ever since we were actually dating. We would actually just go on walks and just talk about, how we want things to be, Every Christmas we'd come home to New Zealand. The mum and dad would take the kids. We'd check into a hotel for 2 or 3 days and actually just spend the time thinking about what our year ahead looks like, what we need from each other, what we're going to do with the kids. And for people listening, they go, "Gee, this sounds very, very planned and organised." And but it's just actually the stuff that you need to process, because often life just carries on, right? And you often don't get to stop and say, actually, "Hey, listen, are we good? Are we okay? What's going on for you? How are you handling this? What do I need to do to support you this year? Where are our kids at? What do I think we need to focus on this coming year with each of them? What are we doing well? What are we not? What do we need to step up and do better?" So that's the way we kind of operate, and it probably sounds odd for people listening, but it's just what's made it work for us.
It seems odd, but in the best possible way. Like it's all stuff that takes effort.
Yeah, it is.
And if you've got a busy job and you come home and you're tired, often the last thing you want to do is communicate.
I agree, and I think I learnt that I worked for a lot of very senior folk in my career, and I had big jobs early. And I remember talking to a guy who came to see me in Toronto once, and he was like, early 50s, and he said, "Chris, life's not good." And I said, "What's going on, mate?" And he says, "Well, I'm working 80 to 100 hours a week." He says, "I'm going home, I'm really grumpy with my partner and my kids. I'm tired and I'm fatigued all the time, and life's not good." And so we talked about it, and what I've learned is it's actually about energy management. And I always believe, you've got to get connected to, you need mental stimulation, that's often your job. You need obviously physical, keep yourself healthy. You need social stimulation and whether it's spiritual or purpose or something that's connected. And when you get out of whack and get stressed, it's because you're overworking one of those 4 energy types, and you've actually got to try and stay really balanced across the whole piece of it. And it's hard, because life's complex and life is hard, and so for us, that's what that check-in is really about, you can get over-exercised where you get very connected to your work and you get into work, just work mode all the time, and you don't allow yourself moments to refresh and recharge and to put stuff into the bottle when you're giving out a lot. So for me, I've always I learned that from Stephen Covey, reading books when I was very young at 17, how do you manage energy as much as time is really important, and that's a lot of what our conversations are about. Is okay, well, which people are we going to invest in our relationships this year that we are good friends that we need to take to a deeper level. What do I need? Matters often afflicting me around my physical exercise, because I love exercise. We used to do a lot of it together, and then now with my job, it's been the one thing I've actually struggled to sort of get integrated.
I mean, you're a brisk walker. You're like, have you noticed that you've got a very, very quick cadence when you walk? Like if you and Biden did a 100-meter walking race, I reckon it'd be at 25 to 30 meters by the time you finish.
Yeah, my DPS guys say I walk quick. They reckon I go 8K an hour. But
what is do you have a set morning routine or anything? Or
I used to, and that's, to be honest, Dom, that's the one thing I've really struggled with in this job is my body loves exercise, and I personally do as well. It's something I really enjoyed. So Amanda and I used to have, we'd have a trainer come when we lived in North America, and we'd really flog ourselves. We have a little garage converted into a gym at home. I find because my routine's pretty full on, right? So I've always been up, even as a young chap, at 4:30 in the morning. I then, in a parliamentary week, I can go through to 12 or 1 at night quite often. And I'm fortunate, and because I had those global jobs when I was in my late 20s, and I'm used to bouncing in and out of time zones and things, that I just got used to surviving on very little sleep. And so I've always been of the view that when I step through that front door at my house, at my home, my problem is the jet lag, the tiredness, the fatigue, any of that, and it's not Amanda's or the kids' problem. I've got to be on for them. So for me, then the temptation becomes, well, I want to get up early and go flog myself and go for it in the way that I can at times when I might get a little bit of a break or a holiday for a week or so. But then, actually I also need to get, I'm trying to balance quite a few things. So it's the one thing that I don't think I've done well enough, which is integrate my physical exercise and diet and stuff into this job.
Where's the time though, eh? Where's the time?
It's a full-on job. I mean, you've probably spoken to Chris Ipkins and John Key and Jacinda Ardern would say the same thing. I mean, it is a unique experience. I mean, you are drinking from a fire hydrant from morning to night. You can plan as much as you possibly can, and I'm a very planned and organised kind of person, and we have pretty good processes around how we operate at work at the office, but. Equally, you've got to allow for margin for things that just come from left field and throw you off course. And so, it's a full-on job. And that's what I love about it too. It is, and I've always felt it's a life balance thing. People talk about this work-life balance. I've never bought that. I've always thought it's a life balance. And it's, I'm doing this right now. You and I are doing this right now. There'll be a gazillion emails and phone calls outside. I'm not here multi-purposing, trying to do multiple things. This is important. We're going to do this. We're going to have powerful engagement right now doing this stuff. So I think, it is challenging. You're under a huge pressure all the time. There's just a content and a volume of stuff coming at you. If decisions were easy, they're made further down the chain, but the hard stuff comes your way typically. So, but that's why you want to do the job, right? I mean, that's why you really want to do the job. You want to be in the arena. You want to be dealing with those issues. It's a huge responsibility, but it's a huge privilege.
What would your kids, William and Olivia, and your wife Amanda, what would they say your best and worst habits are?
I think they would say, I genuinely think, I've had extreme jobs, from a very young age, right? I mean, I've really had big jobs early, and I think my kids would say that they feel that I've always been very present and that I'm around for them. We don't talk politics at home, just to give you a feel for what goes on in that dynamic. My kids, I am their dad. Nothing has changed. When I was CEO of Air New Zealand or Prime Minister of New Zealand, nothing's changed. I haven't had a deep political conversation with my kids on any of the topics. They have strong opinions. They'll tell me if they feel strongly about stuff. But for them, I'm just dad, and that's been quite cool. But they would say, look, I think he's been pretty present. I'm pretty organised, and so part of my job as a dad is also to set ambition and aspiration in my kids as well, and so it's part of it is also probably to push them a little bit as well, and I think that's important.
What about worst habits though?
Worst habits?
They know you better than anyone. There's got to be something.
They probably don't appreciate getting sent the baby videos that I might watch at 1:30 in the morning on my
baby videos.
Oh yeah, the algorithms on my social media are just weird, mate. I'm in a phase where I'm getting sent all this home renovation stuff and DIY stuff and hacks at the moment, and so I'll often send my daughter hacks on sort of things I've discovered on DIY, which she probably doesn't fully appreciate. But the other thing is Olivia and I love music together, and so ever since she was little, we've always tried and exchange song of the day, and so every day or every second day or so, she'll send me a piece of music on Spotify. I'll send her one as well. And then we have a lot of music pumping through our house at most times when we're all together and hooning around and dancing around in the kitchen. It's great fun. So,
what are you into? I've heard you like country music. Any particular artists?
I actually love all sorts of music. I really do. We grew up in an era, didn't we, where we had, the tape, you might remember the tape decks and you make your own mixtapes and high-speed dubbing and all that stuff. It's funny. I mean, people listening to this conversation will go, what the hell are these two old guys talking about? But no, so I love all sorts of music. I got into country music really because of living in the States for 8 years, and after a while it's just everywhere. And it's sort of not the old country and western that a lot of New Zealanders would know, but it is, Zach Bryan and Luke Combs and that kind of stuff, which is actually becoming more popular here. It's been awesome to see. My song of the year last year would be I Think I'm in Love with You, which was Chris Stapleton and Dua Lipa, doing a combination together. It was pretty awesome. You look at Post Malone and F1 Trillion, his new album, it's pretty great. Zach Bryan, 9 Ball, awesome song. So yeah, that's pretty. That's Olivia and I do music stuff together. That's what we love, going to concerts and things like that.
You mentioned the American piece of the puzzle. So you were away from New Zealand for a long time, like 17, 18 years, and then you moved back to New Zealand. what were your key observations after moving back, like in terms of, in particular, tall poppy and anti-rich sentiment?
Yeah, look, I think the thing I learned, I left here at 24, as I said, probably came back just on 40, I was 40, and essentially I always felt like a Kiwi when I went out overseas, but I learnt different things from living in those different countries. And I lived in what we'd call the Five Eyes countries. I lived in Australia, London, England, and Canada and America. And, when you go to Australia, there's just a lot more directness. It's not personal. It's just that, you and I can be best mates, but I'm going to tell you, mate, that really pissed me off or annoyed me when you did this and that. And it's not personal, but just giving you some feedback. So Australia's much more direct, a lot more confidence in some ways in terms of how you dealt with people. So I found my language hardened up a lot, as you sort of dealt with people in that business setting. When I went to England, it was very much at Unilever, it was an Oxbridge culture, so you had to be really intellectually, have your first principles and your logic really straight for decisions that you were making and how you engage with people and were respected. When I went to America, it's all about, delivery, execution, focus. And so, and you had all the people to join my company, you had to be a Harvard, Yale, Ivy League kind of brain to be able to do that. So, you kept your New Zealandness, but you did pick up bits and pieces from the best bits of different countries, while also observing the bits you didn't think were that great. But I think my New Zealandness, actually, my Kiwiness, actually made me very successful internationally because I was more general. I was broader than most people. Kiwis are good with, we have strong relational skills, and I think that served me really well and made me, I was different from those management people or kids that were coming through in a different system. And so when you came back home again, it was challenging in some ways, but Amanda and I again always thought about it as if we were coming home, which we were so excited about, but we also wanted to manage our expectations that we couldn't just slot into all the friendships we had when we left 16 years ago, because everyone had changed and moved forward. Some of it did happen naturally and some of it didn't. But so we just came back, as every time we moved countries, we always had a view that within 3 months we should be pretty settled, and we had a bit of a process around that. Wouldn't surprise you given how organised I sort of think about things, and Amanda are the same. But it was great coming home, particularly with the family pieces. But I do observe, there are differences. I love the ambition and aspiration of Australians and Americans. I think they celebrate success. And I've observed that here in New Zealand. I've probably been the brunt of that at times. I know John Key probably felt the same way. We're kids actually who just came from regular backgrounds, as I've tried to talk about today, who, got a great education, managed to do well for ourselves, and that success is, sometimes you feel it's like a negative thing, and it's like, well, don't you want why can't someone successful like me come into the parliament? I know my background's not a standard career politician. I've done a bunch of other stuff that I think has skills that are transferable into that. You want Parliament to be representative of all New Zealanders from all walks of life. But just because I've been successful and that's not a reason why I can't be in Parliament either. And I actually think it's what New Zealand kind of needs. Yeah.
Do you find that frustrating?
It's not. I don't get frustrated by the criticism. I mean, I listen to the criticism. It's like social media. I'm sort of informed, but I'm not consumed by it. And I also of the view, and I've had this view from a very young age, is that I don't take offence from people I wouldn't take advice from. And it's pretty simple, So, and frankly, if you want to critique and carp from the sidelines, feel free. But actually, otherwise, show some guts and get into the arena, step into the process if you want to. I don't have to do this job. I choose to do this job. I want to do this job because I genuinely am committed to a mission of improving and realising New Zealand's potential. I've been all around the world. I've seen the good, the bad of each and every country. I know we got an awesome potential. So I get connected to that. And therefore, to be honest, the criticism doesn't really worry me. I have to listen to it because there's often good points of feedback in there of how I can be better. But you have to watch some of that stuff, yeah.
Because if I've got my information that I read online correct, your pay cut from Air New Zealand to Parliament was like 90%.
Yeah.
Like 4 million to, I think you're on just under $500,000 now. So and it seems like there's just sectors of New Zealand that just have a real issue with someone earning that sort of money. Yeah,
look, I get it. And, I don't. I mean, you don't make a change like I've made people would say, if you really were motivated by money, you would be, in the peak earning period of your life, you wouldn't be doing politics, right? So for me, I've not been a deeply material person. Yes, I've been paid very well, but our family and I try and live with the values that I was raised with in New Zealand and try and impart that to my kids and. And Amanda and I don't live what we'd call high. I think even John Key would tell you that he thinks that we don't live like that. But but I just I get it, and I understand why that is. But I think I feel like I know what's going on in New Zealand. I've come from a background, I have family, I see people each and every day who are doing it tough. I understand that reality, and just because I may be in a different place because of my background or career doesn't mean I don't care or I don't understand what's happening for people. That's why I'm actually in politics, is because I think we can do so much better than what we've been doing.
At the point we're recording this, I'm guessing you're about halfway through your current term as Prime Minister.
Exactly, pretty much half time.
Report card. What have you done really well? What could you be doing better?
Yeah, look, I'm one of those people who's constructively dissatisfied all the time, so I always think there's things I personally could be doing better. I think, that we could as a team could be doing better. I'm grossly impatient about the results and outcomes. That's why I think if I zoom back a bit, I think New Zealand public, but I think when I talk to other world leaders, publics all around the world are just grumpy, they're frustrated. It's an age of dislocation at the moment with technology and disruption, and they're over politicians and glib sort of bumper stickers and statements. They kind of want you to deliver outcomes and results for them. And I think that's actually why my background and coming in at this time in New Zealand's political history is actually really important, because that is my story of turning things around and sorting things out and getting better results and outcomes. So I think what we've done well is we've formed the first three-party coalition government in New Zealand. Really difficult thing to do, but MMP is our political system, our electoral system. It's matured. It's coming up almost 30 years since we've had it now. It means that you have to find ways to collaborate. You may not wish to do so, but actually the New Zealand people vote and they give us an election result on election night, and then we're tasked with trying to make that work. And I think the way that our coalition has come together with very big and different personalities and different parties with different policies and different constituents, you see it in Western Europe. It's the same system that we have here in New Zealand. I think we've done a good job of managing that and keeping the government focused on what it's got to do, which is sort out this economy, restore law and order, better public services. So, that's also got to get performance out of the public service to help us do that as well.
Yeah. Now you're a relentlessly positive optimist.
Big time.
Journalists by nature are sort of negative, glass half empty people, I'd say. I've noticed a couple of times it seems like you've got snappy with the media.
I don't think I do. I might have a furrowed brow from time to time, but I don't. No. Actually, the media have got a job to do, right? I mean, they have a really important job to do, which is to hold us to account, and that's something I hugely respect. I don't always agree with them or their view, but I also just don't think there's any value in me complaining about it either when I think we've been treated unfairly or I think there's a principle that hasn't been held up. And I'm kind of a principle fairness kind of person at my heart, so I sort of sometimes you can react to things personally about the media. But I try and take all questions. I try and patiently explain what I think is going on and give context for stuff, because you do need our media to function well in order to get the message out to people, and that can be a real challenge. It can be a real challenge. But also there's other ways to talk directly to people. I've had the best conversations, for example, on mental health on the Rock with the team there, because those guys really get it. They really understand Bryce and Roger and all the team. They really have done some amazing work on mental health. I've had high quality conversations on the Rock, able to talk to 250,000 people about why, what we're going to do in mental health. So there's other ways to get messages out as well. But the media can, it's one of the it's something, having been in politics for 4 years, when you're standing in a scrum where, people are just firing random questions at you, and sometimes there's a bit of groupthink where they all get on one issue, and you're going, well, actually, I'm not sure that's what New Zealanders are really focused on right now. They're really struggling getting through from paycheck to paycheck, trying to get through their, grocery shop each week. Why don't we talk about what we're going to do to fix that problem, rather than a process story or a gotcha story around the inner workings of Parliament or a political piece. I think they do a really important job, but it's also, I think it's really important that's why I get out of Wellington pretty quickly each week, is because yesterday I was in Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, right? When you're talking to people there, sometimes the conversation we've been having in Wellington isn't that relevant to what's going on in their life. What we were trying to do yesterday was get 149 houses built for solo mums that need homes and good communities around them, and that was pretty exciting. That's what you really enjoy about the job. So the media is what it is, and they've got a job to do. And my thing is, I think every politician, if you spoke to former prime ministers as well, they would say they don't always agree with it. But me whinging about it, complaining about it doesn't help.
Suck it up, buttercup.
You kind of have to, because actually it's like I say to my team, they can often get bent out of shape about how they think we're being treated or not treated fairly or whatever. But it's like, guys, when you're playing a game of rugby, if you've got a bad ref, you've got to find a way to win, and win ugly, win nice, but you've got to find a way to win. And so don't complain about the ref,
Oh, what about, speaking of media, there was that interview with the Hosk a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
where one of your team resigned. Mike asked if you would have sacked him otherwise. And
and obfuscated, yeah.
What were you doing? Were you just protecting him? You made a promise to him that you wouldn't throw him under the bus?
No, that's a great, thank you for raising it. It's a great question to ask, because there's a really difficult situation. We're a really hard-working individual, has done a great job as a minister, really passionate about what he's doing, was doing a really great job. And, he made a mistake, and, he fronted it. And, let's be clear, the mistakes, when you do them in politics, they're all public, everybody sees it. It's quite a high bar. And he came to a decision and came to me and said, look, I think I need to resign over this issue. And I said, I think you do too, and I think that's appropriate that you do so. So I just didn't want to put the boot in, frankly, because, again, it's part of, ministers are human, right? We're all human. Prime ministers are human. You all have feelings. You all have families. You have friends. You cocked something up. You made a mistake. And, do you really need to sort of pile in, is kind of how I felt about it. And rightly or wrongly, that's why, when he kept asking me the question, would you have fired him? Would you have fired him? Would you have fired him? Well, I just didn't feel, I probably answered it from a human point of view of like, is this really what this individual needs right now, is to say the Prime Minister would have fired you anyway, And so, I didn't probably get that one right. I should have answered more definitively about it. But it was actually, you get caught between a human moment of trying to care for the individual who you actually have worked with and know well, and yes, has a different personality, but actually just genuinely made a mistake, right? And has taken responsibility for it. And do they really need me piling on? But equally, the media, quite rightly want to know, well, would you have fired him or not?
When Mike asked the same question in a different way the fourth time, why didn't you just throw your mate under the bus?
Well, it's as I said, because that's the dissonance that you have inside, right?
Yeah, you're the big dog.
Yeah, I am. And the answer is yes, I would have, because it was an issue that I felt was inappropriate, and it would have led to that. But the point was, I'm just trying to explain to you how in the moment and that question and
I think it was very generous of you. Maybe loyalty to a fault, some might say.
Well, I just think I got it wrong. I could have been more definitive, and I could have answered that much better. But the point was, I was trying to. There's a human moment to these things, and I get it. In politics, it's pretty brutal sometimes, and but I still think people are human.
Yeah. Just back up to something you said before. You mentioned The Rock, and you gave them some flowers for their work around mental health, which is well deserved. How's your mental health been?
Good. I think because I sort of came, as I said to you earlier, with a mum who was always asking, how are you feeling? What's going on for you? And someone I could always process and talk with as well. And Dad's the same. I think genuinely I've learnt to I was really lucky I had some of that equipment on board before it was a popular thing. Not a popular thing, but before we talked about it as openly as we do now. And when you and I came through, it was a lot of stigma around mental health. And John Kerwin's a good friend, and I often just say to him, mate, the work that you have done to take that stigma away, now our question and conversation is about access for services and support for mental health. So I've also read a lot about mental health, and you have to know yourself really well, right? And I think people go through life often not knowing themselves at a really deep level as to when they are under pressure and when those cracks are appearing. And in a job like this, with a huge pressure and huge stress applied, cracks appear, right? And everyone's personality's under pressure. The cracks appear. And for me, I've just learnt to process as I go. So for me, as I said, it is little things like I have to stay really balanced in those four different energies. When I hang out with my friends on a weekend, we don't talk politics. We're just doing life together with all its ups and downs. I've got a good group of friends, my brothers, my family as well, that we just sort of do life with. So I feel like I can process it quite well. I don't mean that to sound arrogantly at all, because I know it's difficult for people, but there is routines that you have. Like I know I need to socialise with friends and family because that fills me up. There's a lot of asks of you where you're giving out a lot, but how do you fill up the bottle, as Paul Keating would say, and actually sort of fill it up with just life, and positivity and stuff. And so hanging out with the kids, cranking up the music and doing silly dances in the kitchen, and all that stuff sounds frivolous, but it actually is part of managing energy.
When was the last time you cried? Are you an emotional guy? Or?
Yeah. I get moved by quite a lot of things actually. I found myself feeling quite emotional yesterday. I was with 3 young people who'd come from some pretty difficult circumstances and had actually come through a trades program that had got them into a job. And as this 18-year-old kid was telling me his story, I was thinking, man, I'm so proud of you for how you've turned your life around. And these guys telling me their quite horrific stories. I found the abuse and care really hard, really difficult. I read every single page of those reports. I read the case studies, really harrowing accounts. I was crying most of the time I was reading that, as you would expect. So, no, I think it's important you don't hide your emotions, and it's not something you can bottle up. I think you just you should feel emotions. I think it's important. Prime Minister feels. They're not just thinkers; they're feelers as well.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, we know that vulnerability is now like a superpower and it's not a weakness and stuff, but is it possible to have vulnerability and be a strong leader at the same time?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, you'll have people when you are, as a politician, I think there's people feel if you are vulnerable, it's going to be used against you. And in our podcast today, I probably talked about things and whether people decide to politicise that or not. But actually, it's about being human, and we're actually all humans as well. And whether it's Chris Hipkins or Jacinda Ardern or John Key or Bill English or myself, we're all people with feelings as well. So I think I think being vulnerable is really important.
Yeah. Hey, this has been great today. Just before we go, my show is sponsored by the Generate KiwiSaver scheme. So they've given me $500 to give to you, to give to charity.
Oh, awesome.
What's your... There's so many that you could support,
yeah,
right?
I think, there's... I'd love to think about where I would like to direct that, because I know there's a number of places that I would like to think about that a little bit more purposefully. But there's some incredible charities doing some amazing work. And in fact, I'm trying as a government to make sure that we work with many of the community organisations and get the money out them to actually get to the people that desperately need it. But if you don't mind, I would really like to think about how I can make that a difference, because there's a number that come to mind, but I know there are some that $500 would make a big difference to.
Okay, a couple of quick questions from Generate. What's the best thing about being a Kiwi?
I think the best thing about being a Kiwi is that we can, we've got ambition and aspiration. We can take on the world, and we're world beaters. Yeah, we're the best in the world.
And some KiwiSaver advice you'd give anyone?
Well, again, from my family point of view, we've been quite hot on financial, teaching our kids how to manage money well. And it started when they were 5. They had 4 slotted money boxes. They'd be an allowance, $5 allowance. We'd do an assessment on a Sunday night as to how well you had or hadn't done. There might be a $3.50 week because you didn't empty the dishwasher or the rubbish bin. And as a result...
You tax them.
Yeah, and then they get their money in coins as little chaps, and then they have to work out a quarter has to go to donate, and that goes to their sponsored kids on World Vision. And then they have to make a decision on save or invest or spend. And if it goes into save and invest, we doubled it up. And that's how we taught them when they were 5 to 10 as to how to start to manage money. But I just think... get on top of your budgets. It's why I've actually been really hot on this, because I want financial literacy taught to our kids, because I don't think we do that very well. And people with low incomes can manage exceptionally well, and people with high incomes often spend their money and are completely in debt. So it's about teaching, get on a budget, understand what you're saving, get your savings identified, and then just do it regularly and consistently, even when you don't have that much money.
I love that. And final one, say it's your funeral and your family's around, what 3 words would you like people to describe you with?
Love of people, care of family and people, relaxed, open, and did his best. I think that's sort of the sentiments. I often do think about my later stage in life. I want to be able to put my arm around my adult son and say I love you and know that we're in good relationship. That's the stuff that I think will matter. I don't think being Prime Minister of New Zealand or a successful business guy or CEO will be actually what they'll talk about at my funeral. It will be the impact that I've had on people, and that's what I'd hope that would be talked about.
Yeah. You good at telling them you love them?
Absolutely, every day. every day. You know, I was raised that way with my own parents telling me that they loved us and me do the same. And I think sometimes you get to funerals and it's all these things that have been said about these people in funerals that you say, oh man, I wish they'd said that to people before they died. And if you just knew how proud your dad was of you, or your mum was of you, or you know what people really thought about you. And I often, something actually my mum and dad I've talked about a lot is, you know, growing up, is you should tell people how you feel about them now while they're living. Don't wait for a eulogy at a funeral. It's too late at that point in time. So live life now and tell people really how you think about them and how you love them.
Great place to end it. Christopher Luxon, Prime Minister number 42.
Number 42. Yeah,
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great, mate. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.